Well, here's some key takeaways from the G7 summit and a real international smorgasbord with tacos to go.
See the maple trees, maple sugar on the maple leaves. We got the biggest wheat fields growing tall. In Canada, where we see the reversing falls. In Canada, we get to see them all.
G'day, eh? At last week's G7 meeting, Prime Minister Carney had a lot of plates to juggle with a smorgasbord of international proportions. As president of this year's G7, he opened the summit in Kananaskis, Alberta, by saying that it would begin a new era of cooperation that promotes long-term resilience over short-term efficiency. And highlighting the new threat of global terrorism, he said that in this new world, nostalgia is not a strategy.
A turning point in history. And amongst the many decisions taken were control of the spread of weapons of mass destruction, a subject that we'll be coming back to. So as I said, we're meeting at one of those hinge moments, those turning points in history. The world's more divided and dangerous. Hostile states and terrorists have expanded their capabilities and their reach, threatening global security in our local communities. Global commerce, energy systems, even intelligence are all being rewired. En tant que membre du G7, nous avons la possibilité de façonner le monde de demain. Le monde plus sûr, plus prospère, plus juste et plus libre. Mais le G7 doit s'adapter pour arriver à ses fins. Nostalgia isn't a strategy. We have to change with the times and to build a better world.
In the latest taco debacle, the coward once again fled the G7 early after a series of flubs and humiliations. Huffing and puffing about Israel and Iran, he ran away from scheduled meetings with real-world leaders, including Mexico's Claudia Sheinbaum and Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky. But he did stick around for the free dinner.
President Trump was in Alberta, Canada this week, in the resort town of Kananaskis, for a meeting of the Group of Seven. He was scheduled to meet with other world leaders over 2 days, but on Monday afternoon, the White House announced Trump's plans to leave early, right after dinner. I'm in Alberta reporting on the G7 with a team of Bloomberg colleagues from all over the world, including Nick Wadhams, who oversees our coverage of diplomacy and national security. And Nick told me, to him at least, Trump's decision to head home early was not a total surprise.
There had been these hints throughout the day, if you had been looking for them.
Something Nick and I have been following is how the conflict in the Middle East between Israel and Iran has upended the agenda at this summit.
The president, in a brief Q&A with Keir Starmer, had said, he had a lot to get back to.
I think Iran basically is at the negotiating table. They want to make a deal. And as soon as I leave here, we're going to be doing something. But I have to leave here. I have, this commitment. I have a lot of commitments.
He kept foreshadowing that something big was going to happen on Iran. And of course, he had also sent this tweet essentially saying, everybody needs to evacuate Tehran. So that then created a lot of anxiety that, okay, the U.S. is essentially on the cusp of being pulled into the Iran conflict.
Before Trump boarded Air Force One to head back to Washington, he joined the other G7 leaders for an official photograph, and he responded to a few questions from reporters.
It's really nice. I wish I could stay for tomorrow, but they understand.
Is there a reason, Mr. President, that you can't do your business from here?
You have questions for anybody else?
Nick, the official line from the White House Communications Office and from the president himself is he left this summit to go back and deal with the issues in the Middle East. You and I both know that there's a level of discomfort that comes with him being on the road and making trips like this. And on top of that, there's this kind of historical displeasure that he has with sitting in a room of other world leaders and going through these various working groups and plenary sessions and all of that. At this point, are we confident that the rationale that the White House is citing here is in fact why President Trump left this summit early, that it does have to do with the Middle East and nothing more, or is there something else at play here?
I am not at all confident that it really has to do with the Middle East. I mean, yes, there is a lot going on in the Middle East, and you could make a very persuasive argument that the president wanted to be back in Washington with all of the assets and resources and advisors available to him that he doesn't have out in a mountain resort in Canada. However, there are a few caveats to that. One is today was going to be all about Ukraine. And when we had been looking at this schedule ahead of this summit, there was a big question about whether Trump was going to come in the first place. And then we were looking at this schedule and it's like, wow, he's going to be here for 2 days. The first day is all about the economy and trade and things like that. The second day, he's going to be sitting in a room with President Volodymyr Zelensky and other world leaders who are essentially going to try to browbeat him to get on board with more sanctions for Russia, lowering the price cap on the exports of Russian oil, potential new support for Volodymyr Zelensky. And the question we all had was, is he really going to be willing to endure this? It's 8 hours out here talking about Ukraine. That's just not something he wants to do.
Well, to the surprise of many, Carney got the front of the dealmaker to agree to a trade agreement with a deadline of July 21st. Carney put on the pressure by announcing new counter tariffs on steel and aluminum and quipped that the 30-day deadline would help to focus the mind. Knowing the Cittadini, though, it's unlikely he'll stick to this deadline. He prefers his usual 2 weeks.
Within about 2 weeks, I think we'll be able to say in American history, because it's moving quickly. So we're building a lot of wall. We're building new sections starting in about 2 weeks. We're building some brand new sections, large sections.
Additional tariffs on China? Well, you mean when am I going to put the extra $325 billion worth of tariffs? I will make that decision, I would say, over the next 2 weeks.
Someday you'll see what was in that letter. Someday you'll be reading about it, maybe in 100 years from now, maybe in 2 weeks. Who knows? I think it shows far more strength to do it the way we're doing it. And again, whether it's next week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, doesn't make any difference. Whether it's now or in 3 weeks, doesn't make any difference. At some point, we're going to open up our country, and it's going to be fairly soon.
Weeks or months?
I'm not looking at months, I can tell you right now. And we're asking every American to make major changes to reduce social interactions over the next 2 weeks. There's a possibility that sometime today we'll do a quarantine, short-term, 2 weeks on New York. We're very advanced in testing. Other countries are calling us to find out what are we doing. And by the way, within 2 weeks, you'll see numbers and you'll see different forms of testing. The peak, the highest point of death rates, remember this, is likely to hit in 2 weeks. Nothing would be worse than declaring victory before the victory is won. It would be very, very proper and very nice if a winner were declared on November 3rd instead of counting ballots for 2 weeks. If you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days, I heard it from Putin.
And do you still believe that Putin actually wants to end the war?
I can't tell you that, but I'll let you know in about 2 weeks, within 2 weeks.
But before the Cheeto left, all 7 leaders released a communique urging de-escalation of hostilities in the Middle East, including a ceasefire in Gaza, but notably didn't call for a ceasefire between Israel and Iran. At the time of this recording, we just learned that the U.S. has carried out military strikes, bombing 3 known Iranian nuclear sites. Last month, Canada joined allies to issue an ultimatum to Israel threatening concrete actions if they don't end their offensive actions and end the blockade on aid to Gaza, despite having sold $18.9 million in arms to Israel in 2024.
So, the UN reporting here, more than 50,000 children reportedly killed or injured in the Gaza Strip. That is as of May 27th this year. Now, of course, if you expand out to all civilians, the number is much, much larger. It's still impossible for there to be a real count of what is going on because there is just a complete lack of infrastructure right now in Gaza for there to be anybody there to really account for the level of war crimes being committed by the Israeli government.
Trump's departure was not necessarily a bad thing, said Denise Rudick, director of the G7 Research Group of London. While he was there, it appeared everyone was on eggshells, with leaders smiling but wary that you don't quite know what's going to shift. Yes, I said shift! With an F! They were more relaxed the next day, she said. It didn't look forced, it looked a lot more natural. On the following day, Ukraine's Prime Minister Zelensky arrived to fill the taco's vacant seat beside the Prime Minister. The contrast between the unserious orange buffoon and this war hero and true leader was obvious. The scowls replaced by smiles and laughs. I wonder if they had to swap out the chair after Diaper Don marked it with his scent. Oh, well, although Zelensky didn't get his meeting with the Shitler or get a joint statement from the attendees, he did receive a large helping of new support from Canada. Carney pledged $4.3 billion in support and called for tougher sanctions against Russia, as he condemned Russia's barbarism following its deadliest attack this year on Kyiv.
Canada announced $4.3 billion in new support for Ukraine this morning. Prime Minister Mark Carney made the announcement at the G7, standing next to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. The pledge of support comes just after Russia's deadliest attack on Ukraine this year.
We need support from our allies, and I'm here, and thank you for the military package. It's important for our soldiers to be strong at the battlefield, to stay strong until Russia will be ready for the peace negotiations.
Canada's support package includes $2 billion in new military aid with funding for drones, ammunition, and armored vehicles. The disbursement of a $2.3 billion loan to help rebuild infrastructure and public systems, plus a new sanctions package.
According to the CBC, the G7 leaders did not issue a joint statement on Ukraine. That's because the U.S. wouldn't agree to the final wording, a senior Canadian government source said, speaking on condition that they not be named. While there was one originally planned, the source said six of the leaders were prepared to go far in their language, but the Americans wanted to water it down. The official said the Americans did not want some pointed remarks about Russia to be included, because they feared it would compromise their negotiations with that country over ending the war. The $4.3 billion military package includes $2.2 billion in new military aid and a $2.3 billion infrastructure loan to be repaid by interest charged on Russian assets that are frozen in Europe. Canada's promising a suite of new sanctions targeting Russian individuals, entities contributing to the evasion of sanctions, and 200 vessels, part of what's often called Russia's shadow fleet. The aging tankers are used to evade sanctions on Russian oil. Zelensky thanked Carney and said, "We need support from our allies until Russia is ready for peace negotiations." Some surprising new strategic partnerships emerged as Canada and South Korea vowed to deepen ties, including in defense and security, energy and climate-focused innovations and trade as well. Canada will also invest in Latin America and Caribbean markets, filling the void left by the U.S. in this region.
President Trump's early departure from the G7 summit created a vacuum that the host nation, Canada, was quick to seize. With the absence of a dominant U.S. presence, Canada found both the space and the conditions ideal to strengthen its alliances with guest nations attending the summit. On the final day of the G7 summit, which concluded today, several significant meetings and agreements were finalized, from a military cooperation discussion between Canada and South Korea to Canada's bold move to step into the global aid space traditionally dominated by the United States. These developments signal Canada's growing ambition to fill the void left by the U.S. in international engagement, marking a subtle but clear shift toward a more assertive global role. Let's start with Canada and South Korea's agreement. On June 17th, during the G7 summit, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney and South Korean President Lee Jae-myung held a bilateral meeting that reinforced the growing strategic partnership between their countries. This was President Lee's first major diplomatic engagement following his June 3rd election, and it marked a significant moment in South Korea's pivot toward a more pragmatic, economically focused foreign policy. For Canada, the summit provided an opportunity to strengthen its presence in the Indo-Pacific and diversify its alliances beyond North America. During their meeting, Carney and Lee agreed to deepen cooperation across multiple sectors, beginning with defense and security. They expressed a shared interest in expanding collaboration within the arms industry and defense technology, aiming to bolster mutual resilience and reduce dependence on traditional partners. Energy security and climate technology were also central to the talks. Now, let's take a closer look at the Canadian government's announcement on development financing in Latin America and the Caribbean, which appears to be stepping into the role traditionally played by the United States in the region. According to a statement from the Canadian government, Canada will be taking concrete action to help build stronger economies and more resilient international systems by providing up to $544 million in guarantees for new development financing in Latin America and the Caribbean. In 2025, the U.S. has slashed approximately $60 billion from foreign aid programs, cutting over 90% of USAID contracts, eliminating around 5,800 multi-year agreements, and severely impacting global health, humanitarian, climate, and development initiatives.
Another leader that sparked controversy, despite protests over Carney's invitation to India's Prime Minister Modi, he attended for the final day of the meetings. Carney insisted that it was crucial to restore diplomatic relations and to turn the page on matters. But Sikh community leaders and others say that he should not have extended the invitation without assurances of cooperation. Canadian intelligence implicated India in the murder of Canadian citizen Hardeep Singh Nijjar, a prominent member of the Sikhs for Justice, and spearheaded the group's Khalistan referendum campaign 2 years ago this June. 4 Indian nationals living in Canada have been charged with Nijjar's murder. There were also credible threats made against former NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and his family in 2023 from an alleged Indian national with ties to the Lawrence Bishnoi gang.
One of the other major points coming out of the G7 is an attempt by Canada and India to reset relations, as an invitation of Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was incredibly controversial, drawing protests from Sikh groups over the death of Sikh activists in BC 2 years ago, Hardeep Singh Nijjar, and in the wake of law enforcement accusing agents of the Indian government to a targeted campaign against Canadian citizens. But the two sides have agreed to designate new high commissioners and restore regular diplomatic services to citizens in both countries.
Balpreet Singh of the World Sikh Organization of Canada told CTV, "Dialogue is not necessarily bad, but it has to be principled," and says announcing the appointment of a new High Commissioner raises a lot of questions. Until there's accountability and a commitment to actually work with Canadian law enforcement, these ongoing investigations did not do it anymore. I think any dialogue is premature. Jody Thomas, former National Security Advisor to Justin Trudeau, says that until there's some acknowledgement from the Indian government about what happened, there will always be an element of distrust. I think that the level of trust will take years to rebuild, but it has to start, and calls the G7 bilateral meeting a critical step forward for the relationship between the two countries. I think that the expectation that India understands the damage they have done here in Canada is really important. The CSIS report also labels China, Russia, Iran, and Pakistan as main perpetrators of foreign interference and espionage. CSIS also alleges foreign interference in the Conservative leadership race, writing in the report that Indian proxies funded diaspora community organizers and amplified pro-Polyev narratives during his Conservative leadership campaign. And while he won decisively with 68% of points and without evidence of direct collusion, the operation mirrors India's regional strategy: identify potentially sympathetic politicians, mobilize diaspora networks, and promote the religious fundamentalist Hindutva ideology. Canada is home to 1.8 people of Indian descent. And during the election, Pipsqueak Polyev refused to get a security clearance, even to get pared down security briefings. He rejected the terms from Canada's spy agency because it wouldn't enable him to act on the information. Last December, CSIS said that it was looking to share some information to the leader of the opposition through a threat reduction measure, but Polyev would be legally prevented from speaking with anyone other than legal counsel about the briefing and would be able to take action only as expressly authorized by the government, rendering him unable to effectively use any relevant information he received, spokesperson Sebastian Skamsi said in a statement to CBC News. Recent events in Canada and beyond have raised legitimate concerns about foreign influence and potential security risks. So please lend your voice to this petition listed below, requiring that all candidates for party leadership or high office undergo security vetting. Let's get Pierre PP to show his cards. So please follow the link in the description. The petition closes on June 27th, so don't wait. Elbows up. Stay safe. Oh, and before I go, I just want to say a big thanks to our newest Canadian Drain contributor, Amanda, Katz, Amanda and Friends, for all of her help with the research and writing. And I don't do this just to hear my own voice. I plan on hosting some special guests and friends soon. And don't forget to like, share, leave us a comment. We read them all. Stay tuned for more on Political Drain Canadian Edition.
Hey, yeah, you. Before you click away to watch someone unbox a tactical toothbrush, let's talk about something real. Political Drain isn't just another content mill. We're a digital front in a very real war. Not with bullets, but with ideas, with action, and with solidarity. We pair urgent news with critical education. And we build community around actual resistance, not the hashtag kind. The kind that moves. But here's the thing. None of this is free. It isn't. Behind every video is time, labor, research, and some weird guy asking if we're going to pay the hosting bill. And yeah, some of that money goes to things we can't necessarily say out loud. If you know, you know. Let's just say our special ops aren't Call of Duty LARPers. They're people making real moves to protect, uplift, and organize. You're not just funding a channel. You're funding a resistance network in a world where capital still calls the shots. Unfortunately, in a system built on artificial scarcity, even mutual aid has a price tag. And if we want to grow, if we want to win, we need your help. We need your help. So if you've got even a few bucks to spare, toss it our way. It's not for ads. It's not for merch drops, but for people making moves in the shadows so others can do it in the light. It's just us and you. So fund the mission, fund the fight, fund the future, because nobody's coming to save us. We save each other. That's how this works. Follow us on all these things you see here, and our link tree is in the description. Maybe even get some merch.